Okay, welcome back. I am joined by my TCM colleague, Jacqueline Stewart, professor of cinema and media studies at the University of Chicago. And Jacqueline, I have to say, I've been doing the noir thing for decades now. And from almost the very beginning, when I would be at theaters showing these films, I would have African American people come up to me and say, is there any noir that stars African Americans? Are there any of these, right? Which became fairly common in the 70s and 80s. But before that, I had no idea. So discovering this film was hugely significant for me to see this movie made contemporaneous with the original noir era that was entirely about the African American experience in America. But of course, it couldn't be made in America.
No, Eddie, that's so interesting and important to recognize that your efforts to preserve and to show film noir have raised these questions, right? Like, what about the African American experience? You would think that given what we know and what we understand about the complexities of Black life, given what we know about the kinds of complexities that film noir was representing, especially because film noir is an urban genre. It's a striking absence from kind of mainstream noir that you don't have more significant African American characters. And then you might also think that during this period in which there was still, at least earlier in the 1940s, there had been a really active independent Black film movement, that maybe there would be some of those race movies that would have some noirish elements, but the timing is a little off because noir kind of, really takes off after the war and the kind of pessimism that characterizes a particular kind of American outlook during that time. So there's a gap there, and Native Son just, sits right there. And unfortunately, because the film was so heavily censored and so heavily criticized, it just was not taken seriously for decades and decades.
Yeah, it's a really important point, Jacqueline, because there were almost 60 minutes of the movie cut out for the American version of this film. It's sort of like, why even bother? I can't imagine how you can take 60 minutes out of this movie and have it be remotely coherent. But I think people can obviously figure out what it is. I mean, all the stuff with Richard Wright and Jean Wallace, all of the stuff with her boyfriend who was the communist, all of that stuff was removed from the film. And that maimed version of the film sort of became the version that everybody saw, even in other countries, sadly. So I can only imagine it was completely devastating to them.
Yeah, it was. And for me, it just plays up the crucial role of film preservation, how important it is to continue to look for any and all traces of these films, because there are so many cases when we're not seeing what audiences saw originally, or we're not seeing what the filmmakers intended. Another reason why I think it's so important that this film has been restored and preserved is because it has so many lessons that are relevant today. There are moments in this film, for example, when we see the police just running rampant through the Black community trying to find Baker Thomas. And the people speak back. They're like, you're looking for one guy. Why are you harassing all of us? They even come in while a woman is giving birth in her home. And so it's just an incredible documentation of Richard Wright's prescience and a reminder that the kinds of issues that we're talking about today with regard to race in America are long-standing and need this kind of interrogation and critique.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, Jacqueline, because I really want to give a shout out to a couple of my colleagues. First off, Fernando Martin Peña, I call him my man in Buenos Aires, who years and years ago discovered a complete 16 millimeter version of this film that he deposited at the Library of Congress in the hopes that it would one day be restored. But principally, my colleague Edgardo Krebs, also an Argentinian who is an anthropologist at the Smithsonian, is really the person who almost single-handedly has revived and resurrected this film. And years ago, when I was doing my Film Noir Festival in Washington, D.C., Edgardo arranged a screening of this film for me, and I cannot express how sort of honored I am to just play a small role in having resurrected this film. But really, Edgardo Krebs is the man who pretty much single-handedly has championed this thing from the beginning, and I just can't thank him enough. Well, Jacqueline, I thank you so much for joining me this week, and I look forward to when we can actually be together introducing more films.
So do I, Eddie. Thank you so much.
A pleasure. And the rest of you, make sure you come back next week because we're continuing this commemoration of Black History Month with the great Harry Belafonte, who is the producer and star of the wonderful heist picture from 1959, Odds Against Tomorrow. So you do not want to miss that. So join us back here next week.